What is going on, guys? It is Jake Sanderson, aka Snowman Cycling, and I am back once again with another race retrospective whilst I'm off the bike. And this time we're going to have a look at my worst ever racing mistake, when we see what happens when you bring a knife to a gunfight, and will it stop me getting on the Zwift Racing League podium? Let's find out. So this is a course some of you might remember from just over 1 year ago that we did in the Zwift Racing League, where we did 3 laps of Countryside Tour in Macquarie Island. And those of you that have been doing ZRL for a while will definitely remember this course. There was a lot of controversy around it, around what bike you should be using and if you should be doing a bike swap, because most of the lap is on the tarmac, which favours the road bikes, but the KOM, which is the most important part of the course, is on gravel. And the 2 prime segments will be on the sprint at around the 5k mark, and then also that gravel Temple KOM 2.5 kilometers at 3.6% at about the 8-9 kilometer mark. And 3 laps means, unfortunately, this is going to be 45 kilometers of racing, which is exactly what I look forward to at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday evening. I can rarely sleep straight after a race, especially one that late. I need a bit of time to unwind. But after this race, there was none of that. I was so exhausted, I could barely get off the bike, let alone keep my eyes open. So let's have a look at why this one panned out the way it did. So by the time we are approaching this first sprint segment here, it's been a pretty easy start to the race. Everybody's obviously conserving some energy for this segment. My job here is not to score points, it's going to be to save myself for that comp coming up in a couple of K. So I let my teammates do the job here for me, and I just do enough work to stick in the pack with as little work as possible. Now you'll spot here that I am on the Tron bike. So when we were talking about earlier on which was the right bike for this race, it was very controversial. Everybody seemed to have a different opinion. Some people thought you were better off on the Tron bike, some people thought you were better off on the gravel bike, and some people thought you were going to be better off doing a bike swap. I was of the opinion that the Tron bike was probably the best way to go because it was the majority of the route and you could save more energy in the draft on the flats, and that the climb was probably short enough that you could just hang in there. However, earlier on that day, I did watch a couple of recon races and I spotted a scary trend, which was that pretty much everybody at the front of all these races was on a gravel bike. That meant some last minute calculations, and I seriously thought about swapping to the gravel bike for this race, but as a team we decided not to do that. And I don't know it yet, but that's going to turn out to be a unbelievably huge mistake that is going to cost me more watts than I have in the tank. As we get to this first KOM, let's have a look at what I'm talking about. So as you can see here, the pace is really hot from the word go, and that's a big mistake that I made. I didn't think it was going to be quite that hard, and I thought I would let the people going for those foul points kind of burn themselves out a little bit, and I would just do my thing, close the gaps, get on the wheel. This is the final race, race 8 of this series. I know these riders all really well now. Generally speaking, I am the strongest of them on any of these 5-minute climbs. So I'm using that, I'm keeping that at the back of my mind. But this climb's a really weird one because the speeds go so slow on it that when those gaps open up, if you're not in the draft, you are really at a disadvantage. So I'm having to put in big numbers here, and I'm still just drifting further back. So I realise here that the front of the race is drifting away from me and it may not come back. As I look up the road, I can see that that gap is absolutely huge to the front group, and I make the decision that if I am going to stick at the front of this race, I'm going to have to put in a absolutely huge surge now to try and close this gap. I say on the race radio to my teammate David just behind, if you want to come with me, because I gotta go. Let's try and get onto this group, because otherwise we can kiss goodbye to the front of this race. It takes an absolutely titanic effort here to try and get back onto this group, and I definitely burned my fair share of matches that I would need later on in this race to do so. This is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in a race. It absolutely killed me. The surges here are above 400 watts and we're only about a third of the way up the climb. So I'm in survival mode here. I'm not trying to beat these guys on the gravel bike at this point. I'm just trying to cling onto their wheels for as long as I can up the top of this climb, and if I've got anything left at the top, maybe try and use that sprint power to come around them and snag a few foul and FTS points. But mainly, I'm just concerned about not letting them drop me here. And if you're wondering why this is such a big deal, why this bike is such a mistake, it's because those riders on those gravel bikes are doing between 0.3, 0.4, maybe even 0.5 watts per kilo less than me for this 5-minute burst. And they're dropping me. We can see that via Zwift power after the fact when we look at the segment results and the powers, the durations, that I did way more power than these guys. for this 5-minute segment and they nearly left me for dead. That's because I'm an idiot. I've made an absolutely huge mistake and I am on the wrong bike. This is the cycling equivalent of Crocodile Dundee, and everybody else in this group must have been wondering, who is this idiot on the Tron bike? What is he doing? Why is he here? And why is he not on the gravel bike like the rest of us? And this is the moment where they decide to really test how strong I am and start attacking towards the top of the climb. But don't worry, I have got my praying mantis attacking a coat hanger in slow motion impression, dialed in to a T. And that's going to help me cling on here to the front couple of riders over the top of this group, but not to the front two. They really did drop me here and leave me for dead. So it's all I can do to cling on where I am, try and pick up a few points and regroup on the descent. And in theory here, I should have an easier time on this tarmac than the other riders on those gravel bikes. They should be doing more watts than me just to stick with me. But it's not really an advantage because I'm not going to be able to go solo here and put them under pressure, and I've already had to go so much harder than them on this climb that I just really need that recovery. I've done 0.3, 0.4 watts per kilo more than them. So they're going to have a higher average power duration at the end of this race, but my spikes are going to be much higher than theirs, and that is what takes the energy and the matches out of the legs. And by the time we get to the next sprint on the next lap, I've been doing my best to recover, but I've really struggled to bring my heart rate down. That climb absolutely killed me. I had to go so much over threshold. I had to close that gap. And it just took so much out of me that I've got very, very little here. And I've got one eye very firmly on the KOM coming just a bit further up. But one thing I did want to quickly draw your attention to here was a particular rider. I generally never call riders out in my races, but there's a rider here, T. Kemp, who definitely had something strange going on with his power during this race, as evidenced by the fact that he was removed from the results straight after the race. He's a rider that in this 8-week series had never finished higher than 40th place and had never picked up any segment points. So I knew it was weird that he was here at this point anyway. But his best ever sprint for 15 seconds was 12 watts per kilo. You just saw him do 16.5 watts per kilo for that sprint, which is really, really weird. His best ever 20-minute power before this race was 3.4 watts per kilo. But on this race, he did 4.2 watts per kilo. I can only assume that he had a calibration or equipment issue and problem, which is why he was then removed from the results later on. He's never done any power even remotely close to that since then. So we're going to put that one down to him having an incorrect equipment, probably no fault of his own. Although I do think if you're doing 25% better power than you've ever done before in a race and you're at the front of it when you've never even been in the top 40, you should know something's not right and probably stop doing 16 watts per kilo, killing everybody on every segment, especially considering you've never really picked up any points in the first 7 weeks. But that's just my opinion. At least he was removed from the results after the fact to keep the integrity of the race alive. But combining that with the fact that I have made a huge idiotic mistake of putting myself on the wrong bike and having to do more work than is necessary means that genuinely this is the angriest I have ever been in a race. And I'm going to have to try and feed off that anger, use it to keep me in touch with the front of this race, and hopefully give me a few extra watts out of sheer rage and annoyance at myself. And as you saw when we hit the base of this KOM, the group behind had actually managed to get back on, but they had absolutely cooked themselves trying to close that gap to the front group. And basically, as soon as the climbing then started, they all got dropped again. So they're all, once again, 17 seconds off the back. David from Snow is the closest to the front group. So nobody that was in that front group has been dropped yet. The people that managed to get back on have been re-dropped, and we're basically at the top of this climb as the chaos kicks off once again and people start going absolutely insane trying to pick up those FAL and those FTS points, whilst I am just trying to do my best to cling on for dear life. At this point, I'm basically accepting that if that gap goes and it doesn't come back and I'm dropped, then I'm dropped. I've just got nothing left in the tank. But when you see those wheels open up in front of you, you can sometimes find a little bit of energy in reserve when your mind knows that it's going to be harder if you don't put that burst in now. So I popped the steamroller and I managed to get on to the front of the group. We're in the front 5 and we're going to a final lap. And I am absolutely toasted at this point. Both of those climbs were done at 4.9 watt per kilo average, and the guys around me only did 4.6, maybe 4.7. So really quite a lot harder for me. So that is going to take its toll. And by the time we hit this next sprint segment, I'm basically in survival mode. I'm not even trying to pick up any points. I'm just trying to stick with this group. And by the time we get to this KOM in a couple of K's time, I've tried 1 or 2 small breaks on the rises. I won't even show you on the highlights because it was pretty poor. I just didn't have enough. I knew that I probably wasn't going to be able to win this race if we got to the KOM in a group of 5, because every time we've done it previously, I've only crossed the line in 5th place, even though I totally emptied the tank. So my aim here is to just surf the wheels. I really don't want to get caught by the riders 46 seconds behind me because there's so many points on offer. So I'm thinking here, even if I can just cling on to these riders for as long as I can, as far as I can up this climb, and I take 5th place, that would be fine. But if you've watched this channel for long enough, then you know that we don't settle for 5th place. Even when the odds are against us, even when the chips are down, even when we're powered by rage, even when we're on the wrong bike, we never give up, and we will give it everything we've got in search of that win, that podium place, because it's all we know how to do, and we're going to have to use every little dirty trick, every drafting play that I have in the book to try and make up for those missing watts from being on the wrong bike. And let's not understate the importance that rage plays here, because I really am seething. Doing big numbers, watching these riders doing weird numbers, riding away from me whilst I'm on the wrong bike at the end of an 8-week series was not the way I wanted to go out, but that is racing. Sometimes it doesn't go the way you want it to go, and it's about making the best of a bad situation and seeing what you can pull out of the bag. However, unfortunately for me, I am not a magician anymore, and this is the point in the race where I have to let the front group go. The front 4 riders drop me here. They leave me like a stone. The front attacks start because people are trying to win this race, and it means that I am the casualty at the back of this small group. I watch the podium slip away from me. It's all I can do to hang onto the wheel of this Kemp rider. Buoyed by rage, I don't want to let him beat me, but I have basically thrown in the towel here as I have just nothing left, as I watch him disappear into the distance. Except if you've watched this channel before, you'll know that is not how things work here. I always have a plan at the back of my mind. Whether that plan is going to work or not, I am never just going to give up the ghost here and let these riders go away from me without having some sort of idea, without having some sort of plan as to how I can maximize my position. So I'm waiting for my opportune moment here. I'm letting these 2 riders go at their pace. I realize I can't go at their pace. I'm going to have to go at my pace, and then I'm going to have to do what I do best and give it 1 minute of absolute hell to try and climb onto the podium of this race. The most important thing for me here is to go past Kemp and not let him get onto my wheel. I really am thinking I'm going to show you for all those segments you've hurt me on today and show you what this is really all about. And as a consequence of that, I'm doing 400 watts. I can see with only 300 meters to go that Strontal, the rider currently in 3rd place, is just tantalizingly close, dangling up ahead of me, but he's just a little bit too far to catch. I really do empty the tank, and at this point I'm thinking it's game over. There's nothing I can do, but I'm going to give it everything I've got, and I'm going to try with every last watt to see if we can overhaul this mistake and get ourselves on the podium as we manage to come round him at the very, very last second and climb ourselves onto that podium, which is what we deserve after having done the most power in this race for 5 minutes 3 times and still getting dropped. So I did my biggest minute power of the race in that final minute, and it really did kill me. It was over 400 watts, nearly 7 watts per kilo, and as you can see from the look on my face there, I was totally empty. So I hope you enjoyed that one. We had a look at more suffering. Once again, I listened to you last time. Nobody likes the wins. You like to see me suffering. Remember, please like, comment and subscribe. It really helps the algorithm for smaller channels. And remember, race fast, ride hard, and that you are appreciated.